There's a strange moment in every fading relationship, so subtle that it slips through unnoticed. Maybe it's when you're sitting next to the person you once felt couldn't live without, and the silence between you doesn't feel peaceful anymore. It feels like space, an invisible, endless space. You smile, but something's missing. They nod, but the spark behind their eyes feels dim. You talk about the day, but no words hold weight anymore. It's not anger, not a fight. It's quieter than that, like a slow drift of two ships pulling away from each other on still water. No crash, no storm, just distance. The Stoics spoke often of our attachment to things outside of our control, and love, no matter how fiercely we cling to it, is no exception. Epictetus once said, "When something happens, the only thing in your power is your attitude toward it. You can either accept it or resent it." Yet emotional distance is hard to accept because it doesn't announce itself. It's not loud, it's a whisper, a missed touch, an absent gaze, and if you've felt it, you know this. Emotional distance isn't the result of absence, it's the result of presence without connection. You're there, they're there, yet the two of you are not there. How does love die this quietly? Why do we ignore the space until it's too wide to cross? Maybe it's because we're too afraid to look it in the eye. Or maybe it's because we convince ourselves that quiet isn't deadly, just comfortable. But comfort kills. So let's talk about this silent killer, what causes it, what it looks like, and how we might bridge the gap before it becomes a chasm. 1. Presence. Without connection is the first crack. In every relationship, there's a moment when you stop truly seeing the other person. Not because your eyes are closed, but because your attention has drifted. You're sitting across from them at dinner, scrolling through your phone, nodding at their words but hearing nothing. This is the beginning of emotional distance, the quiet crack in the foundation that grows wider when ignored. The Stoics remind us that true presence is an act of intention. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Give yourself entirely to the task at hand." And in love, the task at hand is the person in front of you. Being physically present isn't enough. It's like standing in the same room, but looking at opposite walls. You must choose to bring your full attention into the moment, to listen, to observe, to care. Emotional distance doesn't happen overnight. It grows out of tiny, consistent acts of neglect. We stop asking how they really feel. We assume they know we care, so we stop showing it. The love we once nurtured with effort becomes something we take for granted, like a fire we forget to feed because it seems warm enough, until it goes out. Ask yourself, when was the last time you were fully present with your partner? Not distracted, not half listening, but fully there. To repair emotional distance, the first step is to return to presence. Put the distractions down. Turn toward them, not just with your body, but with your mind and heart. 2. Assumptions are the silent saboteurs. One of the most dangerous habits in love is assuming we already know the other person, what they're thinking, how they're feeling, or why they're acting the way they do. It's a quiet sabotage because it feels harmless, even logical. After all, you know them well, right? But the truth is, people are never static. They're constantly changing, evolving, experiencing things you may not see. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus reminds us, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. When we assume, we stop asking questions. We stop being curious. And this is where emotional distance starts to thrive, because the other person begins to feel unseen, unheard, and misunderstood. Maybe you assume their silence means they're fine when, in reality, they're hurting. Maybe you think their short answers reflect annoyance when it's really exhaustion. These tiny, unchecked assumptions pile up, creating a wall where there used to be a bridge. Instead of connecting, we react to our version of the story, not theirs. The solution: humility and curiosity. Approach your partner like a book you've read 100 times, but can still discover something new on every page. Ask questions, not surface-level ones, but the ones that open doors. How have you been feeling lately? Is there anything on your mind? And then listen. Really listen. Because when you stop assuming, you start understanding. And understanding is how you close the distance. 3. Small resentments become unspoken walls. Resentment is like dust settling in a home. It's barely noticeable at first. You let little things slide, an unmet promise, a dismissive tone, a forgotten thank you. It's fine, you tell yourself, and maybe it is, for now. But unspoken frustrations don't just disappear. They collect. They grow heavy. One day you find yourself unable to look at the person you love without feeling the weight of everything unsaid. The Stoics teach us to deal with problems while they're still small. Seneca once said, "He suffers more than necessary who suffers before it is necessary." Holding on to resentment is suffering twice, first when the moment happens, and then again as you replay it silently, over and over. But instead of confronting it, you keep it buried, convincing yourself that bringing it up will only cause conflict. What we forget is that silence doesn't fix problems, it builds walls. Resentment thrives where honesty is avoided. Maybe it's hard to say, "It hurt me when you didn't show up," or "I feel unappreciated when you overlook the effort I put in." But those hard conversations are the only tools you have to tear down the walls resentment builds. If you've felt emotional distance creeping in, ask yourself, what am I holding on to that I haven't spoken out loud? A relationship where small wounds fester will never feel whole. Address the little things, because little things are rarely little in the long run. 4. Lack of effort is the death of connection. Love doesn't survive on its own. It requires effort, care, and intention. Yet, over time, it's easy to slip into autopilot. We stop doing the small things that once felt natural, the surprise messages, the thoughtful gestures, the way we looked at them like they were the most important person in the world. We tell ourselves, "They know I love them," as if love is a self-sustaining force. But love, without effort, fades quietly into the background. Marcus Aurelius once said, "What stands in the way becomes the way." The obstacle to keeping love alive is often our own complacency. Life gets busy, routines take over, and we stop choosing our partner the way we once did. We prioritize everything else: work, hobbies, screens, forgetting that connection needs nurturing. Think about it. When was the last time you made a deliberate effort to make your partner feel special, appreciated, or truly seen? Effort isn't about grand romantic gestures. It's about consistency. It's in remembering how they like their coffee, showing interest in their struggles, or simply putting the phone down to be fully present. The truth is, relationships aren't lost in big, dramatic moments. They're lost in the quiet neglect of daily effort. A lack of effort says, "I'm no longer choosing you." But the good news, you can always start again. Choose to make the effort. Choose to show up. Because in love, effort isn't optional. It's the lifeline that keeps connection alive. 5. Avoiding hard conversations creates silent distance. The hardest conversations are often the ones we need the most. When something feels off, we sense it, like a shadow in the room. But instead of addressing it, we avoid it. We tell ourselves, "It's not worth the fight," or "It'll pass." What we don't realize is that silence doesn't make problems disappear. It pushes them underground, where they quietly grow roots of distance. The Stoics believed in facing challenges head-on. Epictetus said, Difficulties are things that show a person what they are. In relationships, hard conversations are the mirror that reveals what's broken and the path to repair it. Maybe it's admitting that you've been feeling neglected or asking your partner why they've been distant. Here's the truth. Love can survive disagreements. It can't survive disconnection. The next time you feel something is wrong, don't bury it. Lean into the discomfort and start the conversation. It might feel hard, but nothing creates closeness like two people willing to be honest, even when it's messy. 6. Taking each other for granted erodes appreciation. At the start of love, everything feels like a gift. Every smile, every conversation, every moment together. But as time passes, those gifts start to feel ordinary. We get used to the things that once felt extraordinary. Their kindness, their laughter, the way they show up for us. Slowly, without realizing it, we stop appreciating what's there and we start expecting it. This is where love begins to erode, not because it's gone, but because we've stopped noticing it. The Stoic philosopher Seneca reminds us, we are often more frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality. In relationships, we imagine love will always just be there, as though it's permanent and unshakable. But love doesn't die because of one great blow. It dies from neglect, from taking it for granted day after day. When you stop seeing your partner's efforts, they feel invisible. They start to wonder if they matter, and that's how emotional distance begins. Don't let familiarity steal your gratitude. Pause, notice, say thank you. Love isn't owed, it's given, and the more you cherish it, the more it flourishes. Because when we stop taking love for granted, we begin to see how lucky we really are. 7. Forgetting to grow together leaves you growing apart. Relationships don't stay the same because people don't stay the same. Over time, we change, our dreams shift, our priorities evolve, and our views on life deepen. Growth is natural, but when two people stop growing together, they begin to drift apart. It's not sudden or dramatic. It's like watching two paths in a forest that start side by side, but slowly curve away in different directions. The Stoics teach us that change is inevitable, and resisting it only brings suffering. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nothing happens to any man that he is not formed by nature to bear." In love, this means accepting that both you and your partner will grow, but choosing to walk that growth side by side. When we forget to share our evolving thoughts, dreams, or struggles, we leave the other person behind, unaware of the journey we're on. Maybe you've stopped sharing your ambitions because you assume they wouldn't understand. Maybe your partner has stopped talking about their fears because they feel you've grown too distant to hear them. This silence creates emotional gaps, and before you know it, you've become strangers who only share memories, not a future. To bridge this, you must intentionally grow together. Check in with each other's dreams, goals, and struggles. Ask, what excites you these days? Or, how can we support each other's growth? When you make space for shared evolution, you turn growth into a bond instead of a divide. Because real love evolves, it doesn't stand still. The quiet space between us. Your next step. Emotional distance is a quiet thief. It sneaks in when we're too distracted, too comfortable, or too afraid to face the truth. It doesn't slam doors or shatter windows. It simply pulls two people apart inch by inch. The beauty and the curse of love is that it requires daily care. If you've ever felt that distance, you know exactly how haunting it is to sit next to someone you love and feel like you're miles apart. But here's the trick. Awareness is half the battle. The fact that you're here, reading this, means you care enough to notice. You care enough to ask yourself the uncomfortable questions. Am I showing up the way I used to? Am I still appreciating them? Are we growing together or growing apart? These questions are hard, but they're the doorways back to connection. The Stoics remind us that we must face discomfort to live fully. As Seneca put it, difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body. Here's where you come in. I want you to do something right now, something that might surprise you. Take a moment, close your eyes, and ask yourself this. Who am I emotionally distant from? Maybe it's your partner, a friend, or even yourself. Are you willing to bridge that gap? And while we're being real, leave a comment. Tell me what struck you most. Did one of these lessons hit closer to home than you expected? Have you ever felt that quiet killer creeping into your relationships? Share your thoughts. I'm listening. And guess what? Someone else here probably needs to hear your perspective too. Oh, and don't forget to hit that like button if you felt even a spark of truth here. And subscribe, because this is just the start of something bigger. Life is complicated, love even more so, and together we're peeling back the layers, one truth at a time. So, what's on your mind? I dare you to surprise me in the comments.